Thank you all so much for being here. It's amazing that you all came out today for this, and really appreciate it. We're all here today to raise awareness about the many faces behind a traumatic fatality, a life-altering injury, or those who are dealing with the outcome of an occupational disease. I am one of those faces from a traumatic fatality. 2 years, 5 months, and 11 days ago, my family changed forever. The dynamic of who we are was compromised beyond anything we could ever have imagined. My son Brian was killed in a workplace incident. He was 30 years old. He was married to Casey, and he has 2 small children, Paige and Leah. My daughter-in-law, her father, and 2 CN workers came to my home November 28, 2012, late in the night to inform me of the loss of my son. We were in complete shock. How could this be? We were in complete denial. I told them it wasn't true. I was unable to comprehend what they were telling me. How could this be? How could my son, my firstborn child, one of my very reasons for living, be gone? It was incomprehensible. Brian had been working for CN for about 1.5 years, and he'd taken all the training that they had offered him. He had taken a spare position for a month or so this would mean that he could earn some extra cash, because his wife and him had just put an offer in on a new home, and he was looking for the extra money. I was told that Brian knew his job very well. So well, in fact, that it was hard to believe that he was a newbie, because he was so good at his job. He took his job very seriously, and he knew the risks. Brian did believe that you had to enjoy your job and have fun, or it wasn't worth doing it. But he was a safety-conscious conductor. He loved his job. That November, the job was to ride from Fort St. John up to Fort Nelson, load and unload cars, and return. The ride was approximately 16 hours each way. So they had a mandatory stop partway up at a place called Gouda Siding. This camp had a dining car, cook's quarters, and a couple of bunkhouses where guys would stop and rest, or workers that were working up there had a place to sleep. Rail conductors and engineers often stopped for meals there. That morning, when they were heading out of Fort St. John, they had been given a work order. Brian and the engineer were asked to switch out the fuel car at the siding. The fuel car provided the camp at Gouda Siding with fuel for the generators needed to run the camp. When they arrived at Gouda Siding, they decided to complete this job before they went in and had supper. It was dark, it was lightly snowing, but they figured they could do it quickly enough and have enough time to still go in and eat. They stopped on the main track. Brian jumped off the train and unhooked some of the tail end cars, left them up on the main track. The engineer drove ahead while Brian ran over to the siding and flipped the switch so the train could back down onto the siding, and deactivated a derail. A derail is a mechanical device that's put on the track that railway cars will derail as they pass over it. The derail is put on the siding to stop rogue trains from coming flying down there and causing damage or death to those in the camp. The derail is put beside the switch so it's easy to find and you wouldn't miss deactivating it. Brian radioed the engineer that the switch was set, and so was the derail. The engineer starts backing down the siding slowly, about 3 miles an hour. Now, the initial story that we were told was that Brian was riding up on the side of the full fuel car. So he was standing up on this fuel car as they were backing down to the hookup fuel car where they would pull it out. Brian does have a flashlight, but I can only imagine in the snowstorm that it was kind of like driving into a snowstorm with your high beams on. The engineer tells me that he hears something on the radio. He doesn't know what was said. He feels the cars do something like a jarring motion, and then the emergency brakes come on. This happens when the cars are pulled apart. It dumps the air, the emergency brakes kick on. The engineer cannot make radio contact with Brian. He can't see him, he's 11 cars ahead. He's in contact with the other CN workers in the camp. They can hear the radio conversation and they can hear the engineer calling for Brian. One of the camp worker goes out to see what's going on and he sees the mess. One car has gone off the track. It's rolled over a small embankment and landed up against the bush edge. Brian is found in the snow, crushed by the fuel car. Transport Canada and OH&S determined that Brian had failed to deactivate the second derail that was on the track. Last week, court proceedings were started. Transport Canada has filed charges against CN Rail, 2 for failure to protect their worker, and 2 for failure to inform the worker of the workplace hazards. We've listened to hours of evidence, documentation, pictures, and witnesses. And the sad truth is, at this point, we may never know exactly what happened to our son. We know that he got off the train, and he set the switch so the train could back down onto the siding. We can only assume that it was Brian that deactivated the first derail, because no one else there had done it. But we do not know for sure if Brian climbed up onto the tail end car and was riding there to the empty fuel car in order to hook up, not knowing about the second derail. Maybe he didn't know it was there. Or was he walking down the tracks ahead of the train, knowing all along that there was a second derail there and he needed to deactivate it? He may not have got there in time to deactivate it before the train arrived. Either way, the end result was the tail end fuel car went over the derail. Brian was unable